If we look at some of the more challenging aspects of managing cloud data ecosystem, and again, we define that as being the collection of platforms and services you're using for your data analytics. And the results from the challenges from the same survey, the 140 folks, we looked at the different levels of challenges around data management. And you can see from left to right the which ones were ranked from least to most challenging. They're not necessarily in order of a data pipeline steps, but you can kind of see where the areas are. And again, we're seeing, to recap, we're seeing that acceleration of both number and types of cloud workloads. We're seeing more sensitive data being collected with that overwhelming plan to use it. And then again, the data teams on the supply side are really outnumbered. So what could go wrong, I guess. But these results is not that surprising given that this state and the data engineering and operations challenges are really shifting towards management of sensitive data. If you look at the top three, like masking or anonymizing data, monitoring and auditing, and classifying, cataloging are the top three areas. And on the flip side, you look at the least challenging, things like extracting and loading data in the cloud is more streamlined. It's cloud storage, data lakes. A lot of that work is being shifted to the transform and modeling step with some emerging patterns to transform data like DBT. And so yeah, that's it. This is the current state, right? So we'll dig into some of this, but when we look at like this moving towards sensitive data, the challenges are really multiplying with more cloud platforms, as we saw in the first trend. But when we look at some of these more granular dimensions, the impact of adding a new platform, a cloud platform, or more rules or sensitive data, really seeing it multiplies that risk, cost, and maintenance for managing sensitive information. And so the dimensions, data platforms, for example, just say you have two, maybe they're increasing as a data point. Maybe I have Amazon Redshift and Athena, and maybe I have Databricks, and those are a couple platforms. And then we look at moving clockwise from the top, data use roles. Things like there's contracts and data use agreements with third parties and any kind of other rules you're subject to. Now we're seeing more of these being implemented as companies use more data and more for more sources. And then in terms of geographies, especially for internal analytics teams, how each country is going to have different rules for how data is used, and there's different maybe segmented by the business needs or other data protection laws in the region. And then going down to the bottom, just tables, how many a lot of data lakes can have hundreds of thousands of objects that map to tables, and so how many of those to have sensitive data. And then looking at the regulatory climate, it's a big factor in terms of regulatory concerns, security concerns, maybe data sovereignty concerns in the cloud. And then up to business lines, this is very common to you're building a centralized lake or platform, and how do you segment that data? Policies for different lines of business and isolate them as their own tenant, right? I know there's a lot of talk about data mesh as a architecture pattern to decentralize and some of these things by data products and business lines. So these are a variety, and just making a back of napkin calculation here, you get like 50,000 policies pretty quickly. And if you're starting with the cloud, you may have fewer, but as you mature, it quickly grows as that research is pointing to. All right, if I were to just up level it, I'd like to summarize with just three things from the research before we dig into some approaches. But the three hurdles around these trends, more cloud data platforms and more sensitive data, the net impact of that is it's going to limit the reason you're adopting cloud to deliver more capabilities to the business. That look at multiplied role explosion is certainly a hurdle. Roles are becoming harder to manage across the diverse workloads in the cloud, and like hundreds of users, And we talked about those 50,000 policies. It can require like thousands of roles and tens of thousands of policies, creating a bottleneck for data access. And second pillar around it's hard to classify and manage sensitive data across these heterogeneous platforms. And then third, the disparate data protection. These implementing data protection policies can vary for each cloud platform and service. And so again, that just introduces those challenges that were reflected in the survey.